23 years after the original, Danny Boyle and Alex Garland reunited to dive back into the world of 28 Days Later. The original film is a masterpiece of a zombie film showcasing great style, frenetic energy, and emotional stakes. The sequel, 28 Weeks Later, is a solid follow-up that lacks the essential ingredients and talent behind the camera that made the original so defining. Now, decades later, the duo return to the world of a quarantined Britain, looking to pay homage while thoughtfully evolving the series. Today, on June 20th, 2025, 28 Years Later is released onto cinema screens. The film was written by Alex Garland and directed by Danny Boyle, featuring the return of cinematographer Anthony Dodd Mantle from the original as well. It's the first of a planned trilogy, with the first two films being shot back-to-back and a third, which will be directed by Boyle soon. Nia DaCosta, who directed the well-made Candyman remake, helmed the sequel, which was also written by Garland. This ambitious plan, brought to us by talented filmmakers, is essentially taking the blueprint of the Stranger trilogy, whose first film was amongst the worst films I saw last year. I was excited for the first film of this trilogy. I loved the original and was digging the trailer. It was edited masterfully and sold the film as an intense horror action film that would honor the legacy of the original. The film was not like the trailer, which to some I'm sure will be disappointing, but to me what we got was quite exceptional. The film is getting positive reviews almost everywhere you look. Critics have decisively sided with the film, and I'm sure fans will too. Despite the marketing being misleading, what we get, in my opinion, will be looked upon as one of the best horror movies of the year. So with that being said, let's discuss why I think that. Let's review 28 Years Later. This film is the perfect way to approach a legacy sequel. We aren't following the same storyline. Instead, we find ourselves with new characters years after the events of the original. Characters who would have been molded and involved within the world of the original, in a world that has evolved in a natural way. We are brought back into that original world in a fresh and exciting way. It reminds me of the Watchmen television series and how that served as a satisfying sequel that realistically evolved the world and carried on the story. We get another brutal opening, par for the course with this series, before settling into more of a family drama. This is what the film tries to build beyond anything else. It's a coming-of-age story in a zombie apocalypse. It's a story about family dynamics and how a son and father grow apart, how a son's love for his dying mother pushes him to come to terms with the horrifying world outside the comforts of his hometown. We do get some awesome kills and frenetic action, helped by the film's chaotic editing. This isn't the focus of the film, however, and as we move into the second half, the drama portions start to take over even more. The final act is this emotional and somewhat cathartic experience that gives us a serious examination of characters who are coming to terms with their grief and the constant death that has been grinding on for decades on this island that used to be a beacon of civilization. We also get some unexpectedly effective humor, with Eric's time in the story serving as a great moment to acknowledge the decades of progress and civilization that have evolved outside of the quarantine of Britain. It's quite an effective way to have some exposition and world building of what's happening outside, while giving us a moment to catch our breath and laugh. This is needed because even though there's much more of a focus on the human drama element in this film, the action and the horror still have prominent, heart-pounding scenes. We get some awesome zombie kills with the bow and arrows, with the slow motion effects looking so cool. The film's action is intense and frenetic, obviously not able to match the pure chaotic rage that was the first film, but providing something that is truly intense anyway. Garland's script is very solid, the characters feel like real people, we care about the human drama, and the action is dropped into the perfect moments that progress the plot. I think this is much better crafted by him than some of his directorial work. His metaphors are enlightening and expand upon the concepts of the original. Now, in the aftermath of COVID and living in a post-Brexit world, those same concepts can be expanded and developed in some interesting ways. This is a very well-directed film. Danny Boyle does an excellent job of crafting a relentless atmosphere. I am sucked into this world, I care about these characters, I find the infected to be horrifying, and I am deeply emotionally affected by the third act. The memento mori section of the film, with a masterful Ralph Fiennes, is excellent and emotionally mature. This is some of the most effective dramatic material ever in a zombie story. The cinematography is beautiful. The film is impressively shot with iPhones. This is an astonishingly beautiful film. Moving away from the ugly early digital video camera look of the original was necessary and helps to make this world, which was so painstakingly realized, look breathtaking. There are so many stunning shots in this film. There are also lots of experimental moments and frenetic editing that help to capture the spirit of the original while looking so much better. Boyle has evolved the style of the series masterfully, moving it in lockstep with the evolution of the thematic and metaphorical levels of the series. The acting is well done across the board. I was extremely impressed with Jodie Comer and Elfie Williams. Williams in particular was impressive since child actors are such a struggle with so many horror movies, but he does an excellent job. His character arc is organic and well executed. Aaron Taylor Johnson does a good job as a man whose real character is eventually revealed through small moments before spiraling. What he will do in a sequel will be interesting to see, but I'm glad he was dropped from most of the second half of the film. Ralph Fiennes does a great job and inhabits a character who feels like someone who has been through a lot and comes to terms with the world maturely and beautifully. I love that even in the small moment we get of him from the story of the father, we see his humanity and how it was misinterpreted. His interactions with Spike are comforting and cathartic. After all of the horror he's been through, we finally find someone who has learned to cope with the world in a healthy, albeit deranged way. The soundtrack is amazing. It gets under your skin in moments and drives home the emotional elements of the human drama in a non-overly manipulative way. The incorporation of Kipling's Boots poem into the soundtrack within the trailer has already become iconic, and in the film it also lands well. Young Fathers did a great job with the soundtrack, and it helps to sell everything that happens on screen. I've always loved the soundtracks in the 28 Days films, and this is another banger. I like that this entry in the franchise was able to reconnect with the sense of humanity and hope that was an essential ingredient of the original. There was a whole arc in that film of how Jim, Selena, and Hannah were able to find a sense of hope for a better future, to hold on to a sliver of their humanity, even in the face of such horrendous violence and loss. The way the first film ended gave a sense of optimism in the aftermath of such terror, which gave the film a strong sense of heart and humanity. This was dropped from the sequel 28 weeks later, which felt much more bleak and anti-human. Pessimism was the overriding feeling of that film. Characters made stupid decisions and learned the consequences immediately. That film was more about reflecting a world engulfed in the hell of war and constantly monitored by the security apparatus of a dehumanizingly authoritarian state. In this film, we get a strong connection with the human, with a way to cope with the horrors, with a sense of hope and humanity that makes us care about these characters. The concepts of grief and memory that this film tackles feel so appropriate in this current day. This is such an appropriate 28 Days Later sequel for this era. That is the word, appropriate, that is constantly coming to mind with this film. As a fan of the original and of zombie films in general, this is a revelation, a film that can combine horror, action, and engrossing human drama with a sprinkle of some truly unexpected but much appreciated humor is one that I want to see. There are some great concepts in this film, such as the evolution of the infected, and the alpha is truly unsettling and scary. The editing early on in the film brings us into this unsettling and frenetic world. You can never put your guard down. I do think that some of the editing does get a bit repetitive early on. This is in the constant inserts of British military history and violence. This is hammering home a thematic point, of course, but I felt it was a bit overdone. This was a nice choice, but I think that they went to the well a bit too much for my liking. However, for the most part, the film's style is such a beautiful evolution for the series. You can't just cut and paste, especially in a legacy sequel, and the way Boyle and Garland tackle the sequel is so refreshing and gives me hope for the rest of this trilogy. I can't wait to see The Bone Temple. The way this film was executed set that up very well. This does tie into another small critique I have of the film, that it feels incomplete. It is so obvious in its efforts in setting up a sequel and a world that can be explored in an entire trilogy. I am excited for it, but this does make the film feel slightly undone. This will be fine if the sequels maintain or surpass the quality of this film, but if not, that could be something that comes back to haunt it, as it doesn't necessarily feel like it can stand completely on its own. This is especially true after the silly and over-the-top finale of the film. This Jimmy Savile-inspired cult coming in and dispatching of the zombies the way they did is ridiculous, but to be honest, I enjoyed it. It was a fun way to finish this film and set up the sequel. There's usually some goofy humor that feels out of place in these films. I'm thinking back on the helicopter scene in 28 Weeks Later, so this ending felt in line with some of the wackier elements of the franchise. Overall, this is a great film. You can critique some of the editing choices, and I'm sure some will have problems with the pacing, but to me, this is a beautifully executed zombie film, a worthy sequel to one of the most iconic horror films of the 2000s. I can't wait for the sequels, and my expectations will be sky high for them. This will go down as one of, if not, the best horror movies of the year. We've gotten spoiled again with another great year for the genre in 2025. The 28 Days Later franchise is now developing into one of the more consistent horror series out there. Let's hope the sequels keep this up. I think some people might be disappointed with the film within the context of how it was marketed, which is a shame. I am frustrated by that type of stuff too, but I can't be mad about how awesome this movie is. It's a truly exceptional horror movie, and one I wholeheartedly recommend. Go see 28 Years Later. That's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and to ring the bell for notifications. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of the film. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.